folks, and welcome back to NTI's Japan Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Ziv Nakajima again, and this podcast was brought to you, among others, by Emil Gorgis, a Tokyo real estate agent who specializes in serving international or mixed nationality families looking for the perfect family home. So Emil's an Australian. He's been living here in Japan for the past 2 decades, 8 years of which he's been actively buying, selling, and managing real estate properties in the city on behalf of his own family and a great many happy clients. And he also acts as a mortgage broker on behalf of his clients. So his company has a dedicated loan officer in many of the Japanese mega banks. And if you're a regular listener, you probably already know him from our JREP, the Japan Real Estate Experts panel sessions. So you're probably already aware that the man is an absolute fountain of wisdom on all things related to real estate in Japan, and in particular to family homes, the greater Tokyo metropolitan area, and mortgages. And most importantly, he's incredibly generous with his time and advice, which he's more than happy to provide at no cost or commitment to anyone asking. So if you've been thinking about buying your home in Tokyo, but you've been sitting on the fence for a while, or if you just want to have a chat in English with a real expert, drop him a line on emil.gorgis, that's emil.gorges, emil.gorgis at tokyorealty.jp. Hit him up today and start exploring your options. Okay, so for today's episode, this is another conversation with a potential ski holiday home buyer from the US whose partner is living in Australia. He's actually of Japanese ancestry, not that you'd know it looking at him. So the first part of our conversation revolves around his family history, love for Japan, and then we dive right into the practicalities of purchasing a holiday home in Hokkaido. So the ability to convert the property into a lodging business at some stage down the track, what that involves, staffing, licensing-wise. We talk about city or suburban living versus countryside life, international winter sports hotspots, annual maintenance costs for homes, gardens, back or front yards, and then also into the purchase process itself, how it can be done remotely, what are the costs involved, using a company like ours for facilitating such a remote purchase, and so on and so forth. Nice casual chat with a really nice gentleman. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you again on the other side. Okay, and I'll just bring you up here so I can look at your face. Perfect. So you've obviously, as you mentioned, you've got Japanese ancestry. I can't see it in your face now.
No, my mom must have had much stronger genes or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. My sister, younger sister, she looks maybe a little bit more Asian than I do, but she married an Irish American. Her
Right.
kids don't look Asian whatsoever. They're like blonde and blue eye. I think a couple of them are blue eyes. It's like, where did that come from?
Well, at that point in time, they're already a quarter Asian, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So your mom is actually the Gaijin. That's interesting. It's usually the other way around.
It is. Yeah, my father, as I mentioned in my email, had been interned in the World War II and relocated to southern Colorado. And then he was eventually furloughed to continue his education. He had been in college when he'd gotten first interned. And so he went to graduate school at the University of Michigan. And that's where he met my mom. So,
right.
So that, it's all under, I was sitting watching a play, a musical about it from George Takei. And he was interned in an internment camp in where was it? Arkansas, I think.
He must have been a child at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like 4, I think.
Wow.
4 or 5 when he was interned. But I've always had this anger about it, but I was sitting watching the musical in LA. It was the production in LA. I had this realization, if he hadn't been interned, I wouldn't be here because he never would have met my mom. So there's, kind of a bittersweet story there.
Yeah. So the paths that lead us to where we are, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
So I've fallen in love with Japan in, more ways than just skiing. I love to ski, and I've always, and I'd heard about skiing in Japan and finally had gone, but I fell in love with it during a Walk Japan tour. I don't know if you've heard of that company,
No.
but it's a company based in Kunasaki in Uita Prefecture, Kyushu. So actually, we met I met my group in Fukuoka at Hakata Station.
Oh.
So in your neck of the woods, and we spent like a little over 2 weeks touring Kyushu, mostly Kunasaki, but also went down to spent a couple days in Yakushima, the island on the tip.
Yeah.
And then in Kagoshima, and did a whole bunch of really cool things. A lot of walking in the forests and doing some of the Buddhist priest pilgrimages that is in that part of.
That's gorgeous.
And it was like my ancestors were speaking to me in those forests. So I said, this is where I belong. But
so mostly rural. You haven't explored the cities, have you?
Yeah, before I went on that tour, I actually rented an apartment for 4 days in Kyoto.
Okay.
And wandered around Kyoto for 4 days. And I've gone back with my girlfriend, Caroline. We spent 4 more days in Kyoto, a couple of days in Tokyo, and I've spent a few other days in Tokyo. And I wandered a little bit around Fukuoka for a couple of days in transition, but not.
When was this, by the way?
When was that?
When was this?
Let's see, that was in 2018. I'd gone on another tour with Walk Japan in Kyushu, and started it in Fukuoka, and then went back down to Kunasaki, and then I went back through Osaka and visit my nephew who was stationed in Okinawa, and then came back through Fukuoka and spent a day there kind of resting up before I got on my flight back to the States.
So you know the city as it is today, right? About 10 years ago, it was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating country. I'm really anxious to spend more time there. I wish it would open up soon, but I understand the concerns. So waiting.
Well, I guess it's gonna have to go to just live with it at some point, right? Like get your annual shot or whatever it is. I mean, if it's anything like what my doctor is pontificating about, there's probably going to be strains on strains on strains just coming out every year. It's going to be like a flu, basically.
Exactly. I think that's the way it's going to be.
So. Okay. So, and now you're looking for a ski home, you've mentioned, yeah?
Yeah. We're both, my girlfriend and I, we met on a ski tour in Hokkaido, and we really like Hokkaido, and we've made some friends there during our tours there. We've been there. She's been there 2 or 3 other times, and I've been there 4 or 5 other times. In fact, in 2000, just before the pandemic rose its ugly head, I actually spent 8 weeks in Hokkaido. Yeah, well, 6 weeks in Hokkaido, and then 2 more weeks down in Tohoku in the Iwate Prefecture.
Yep.
So, and but we really have fallen in love with Hokkaido. So,
well, I mean, from our perspective, the acquiring of a home and, the maintenance of a home, or the surrounding area around the home, whatever needs to be done, that's the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also happy to assist with helping you to furnish it if you happen to not be able to enter for a while, and then.
Mm-hmm.
But renting it out is going to be the challenging part, because unless you're in a very international, let's call it foreigner-friendly spot like Niseko, where houses are, $500,000 at the minimum.
Yeah.
Unless you're up there, management companies are going to be an issue. So. Okay. The only way to do that, and I probably wouldn't advise it unless the house is big enough to make it profitable, but the only way that it can actually be done without a management company is by you setting up a company and a business and applying for a hospitality license and actually hiring staff, live-in staff. Otherwise, I'm assuming you don't want to purchase in Niseko where there are some management companies.
Probably not. We both have been there and just, I think I said to my girlfriend's from Melbourne, Victoria, and she says, I don't want to be around
It's little Australia there, isn't it?
Yeah, she's like, I don't want to be around so many Australians. I live with them all the time. So
yeah, true. Plus, it's completely bloated price-wise to the point.
Yeah, I mean, we were looking at prices. She sent me a web page, and she just happened to pull up one from the Seiko, and I was like, seriously?
Yeah.
It's like, holy smoke! But I understand because of the, it's like the mountain of Hokkaido. So
it's a beautiful spot, but I mean, anywhere that's going to be more accessible to foreigners and going to have more infrastructure for foreigners is going to be a hot spot, which means that prices are going to be bloated, and that's what's happened there.
Right.
So unless you are planning to set up a company and actually apply for a hotel or inn license, as they call it, and then there's a lot of compliance, and you will need to hire staff, live-in staff that's actually on site or very close to the site 24/7. And that's probably not going to be profitable unless you're planning on purchasing something that's, I mean, in other spots that are not Niseko, you can probably get cheap properties that are bigger. So maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 rooms would be where it might be profitable to start thinking about having staff there. Of course, once tourists come back, because before that it's going to be a bit challenging to get the occupancy up, right?
Right. The one thing that we're thinking eventually, once it opens up, and is possibly just spending most of the winter time there anyway. So we may not be interested in renting it out during that peak season. So it might not be that might not be an issue as far as generating revenue as an investment type of thing.
Okay, but then how many bookings are you actually going to get off season is the question. Right?
Yeah, that's the thing, and we're not sure that we even care.
Okay, so as long as you're happy for it to just be your holiday home, then that's all becomes very good.
Yeah. So at this point, I mean, if there were some way to make money off of it as for rental, that would be just a bonus. Right now, we're mostly interested in, I guess, satisfying our own habit of being in Japan and being able to ski in Japan.
Okay, so the rest of it is all doable down the track at any point in time. So once you do decide that you want to explore that, off-season, it might be interesting as a corporate retreat or a workation spot or something of that sort, but that can all come down the track. There's no urgency.
Right. Okay. I know Caroline's not that interested in having a bigger place, but I kind of like the idea of that more so because I have a lot of ski friends. Well, I've worked in the ski industry for 30 plus years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Part-time as a ski instructor and now as a ski guide. And so I have like hundreds of people that follow my exploits when I go to Japan, and they're just like, we want to come too. And so I'm thinking, well, if we had a bigger place where people could come and visit and we could show them around, that would be really cool too. So,
well, just to circle back to the original plan, if you're not actually listed on official hospitality websites, and these are just friends who are coming there and, they're maybe helping you with maintenance expenses of the house and so forth, it's not really anyone's business, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that, I mean, there's a bit of a possible overlap there.
Right. Right. Exactly. And also the fact that, we, like you were saying, we could possibly transitioned into something more into the hospitality area if we if we decided on that, if we had found the right spot and everything, property.
Yeah, well, once you become famous enough and all of your skiing friends ended up showing year after year, it's probably a good idea. But you can definitely start at low key. Yeah.
Right. So.
Okay, so do we have a rough idea of locations, budget, size of the place, age of the place, anything of that sort?
Those are things that I kind of wanted to talk about. I think I'd mentioned that that Caroline grew up in Park Orchards in Melbourne area. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a nice suburb. I mean, I visited it, of course, way after she was grown and everything. So it's changed from what her memories of it being, pretty semi-rural. Now it's kind of, Melbourne's kind of grown up around it. So it's not quite as rural, but it's got a lot of more open spaces than I'm used to. I grew up in metropolitan cities in the suburbs where it's, houses are pretty close.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of gravitate towards that. Like our friends in Sapporo live in the south suburbs. I'm not sure it's call it a suburb, but Minamiku.
The ward, yeah.
Sapporo.
Yeah.
And I totally felt comfortable visiting there, but I think she might think that's a little bit too
city.
Yeah. So, we've been trying to expand our search around, but not being that familiar yet with that kind of bordering between rural and suburb, what that, is like. And is there the ability to find existing homes that we want to work with?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously they're going to be cheaper the further you are from the center of a city. Even on the edges of Sapporo, you should be able to find, reasonably affordable places to rent out. Whether the grounds that actually belong to you, the backyard, the front yard, garden, that sort of thing, that's going to be a bit more challenging if you are within the city limits themselves. Because even suburbia in a Japanese city, they don't tend to have huge back and front yards.
Notice that.
That's only going to be achievable, I would say, out of Sapporo.
Yeah.
And the question is, number one, accessibility and infrastructure. So if you're planning to have, your own car parked there throughout the year and you're okay with your snow tires and so forth, then anywhere is okay for accessibility and infrastructure. But I mean, you're not going to be able to take a walk down the street and enter a supermarket, right? That's not going to be.
Yeah. Exactly.
And the other factor there is maintenance. So the bigger the place, the bigger the yard or garden, and the more you're going to be paying in annual maintenance fees.
Sure.
So I mean, I guess there's got to be some sort of sweet spot between your and Caroline's requirements there that might also be reasonably affordable and reasonably accessible. But I mean, that's between you and her kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and we're negotiating it, but we're also like, it's really hard to do remotely, to get that sense of what it feels, what a place feels like when you just see the pictures, and things like that online.
Well, that's where we come in. What we usually do for remote holiday home buyers is we first start with just due diligence, contacting the realtor, receiving as many photos, the layout of the land, layout of the house as possible. And then when we've got some final candidates, then we can organize a viewing trip on your behalf. So we'll be connecting to you via, similar like we're doing today, via Zoom.
Okay. Yep.
And then we'll just, do a walkthrough. And if you notice anything that you want to have a closer look at, you just direct us to the right spot and we have a closer look for you.
Sure.
We can also to a point, we can also do the similar thing with just walking around the little township or a city or wherever it ends up being. But to be honest, to give you a feel of what the city is like, we can give you our impression of it, but it's never going to be the same as you visiting it in person.
Of course.
But for the house and the land around it, I think the remote viewing is usually more than feasible.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good to know.
But what's your I guess two budgets that I'm interested in is number one, your purchase budget, and number two, your annual maintenance budget. Because if it's going to be an older home that's over, let's say 20, 25 years, in cold climates, I'd probably veer more towards the shorter end of that. So maybe older than 20 years.
Yeah.
It is going to come with, on average, somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 a year in maintenance.
Okay.
And you're going to have 5 years where you don't have to do anything, but then the roof needs to be done, and so forth. So statistically, on average, I'd say $2,000 to $3,000 a year.
To put in a reserve fund and stuff like that.
Yes. So as long as you're okay with that, we can look at older homes too.
Sure. Yeah, I think $3,000 to $4,000 a year in maintenance is not unreasonable in our budgets.
Okay.
As far as purchase price, that I don't know. I'm thinking anywhere between 10 and 20 million, but we haven't really sat down and looked, to say, hey, this is exactly where our budget lies. But
that's also a factor of how far you are from the city, because if you're in Sapporo, the 10 million might be the land.
Yeah.
And then that leaves you with maybe about 10 for the house. If you're, further out of the city, then land parcels could be as cheap as 5 or 6 million.
Okay.
In which point you got more to spend on the house. So you get something maybe newer or slightly bigger in better condition, basically.
Sure.
So it all comes back to location first, and then we can work our way from there.
Isn't that all?
We interrupt this broadcast. I always wanted to say this. We interrupt this broadcast to tell you about Tokyo Family Stays. They're a short-term rentals company in Tokyo, and they offer a home away from home experience, which is just perfect for remote working, quarantining, or if you just need somewhere quiet to hide away from the world. So they offer a variety of options for families, for corporate relocations, or simply if you're transitioning between homes in Tokyo. Now, the properties are super comfortable, tastefully furnished, fully equipped with all amenities, and they accommodate up to 10 people. So really the only thing you'll need to bring with you is your toothbrush and maybe a change of clothes. They've got fast, unlimited wireless internet, dedicated workspaces, and fully equipped kitchens, and they're just a delight to stay in, a fantastic alternative to Japanese business hotels, which if you've ever stayed in one, you probably know they're tiny, they're noisy, fine for a night or two if you're on your own, but long-term or with a family, you'll probably feel you're in a jail cell very quickly. So if you want to give yourself a sense of space and freedom by renting a real home with comfortable Western beds, including all the necessities like baby bedding, children's toys, high chairs, you definitely want to reach out to Tokyo Family Stays. They've been at it for over a decade. They're a fully licensed minpaku or short-term stay operator. And as a special bonus for our viewers and listeners, they're also throwing in a breakfast basket upon arrival for anyone who books and mentions the Japan Real Estate Podcast or NTI. And not only for guests, if you're a property owner, you've got an investment property that you want to tweak for higher profits, or a holiday home that you want rented out when not in use via short-term stays, drop them a line today. See how they can help you maximize your property's income. And again, as a special bonus to our viewers and listeners, they're also offering a free audit of your existing short-term stay listings without any obligation whatsoever. So feel free to reach out to them at tokyofamilystays.com. Well worth your visit. And again, if you're in the market for a family home in or around the Tokyo metropolitan area, Emil's your man. Don't be shy to reach out to him as well at emil.gorgees, Gorgees, at tokyorealty.jp.
Isn't that always the case in real estate?
Yeah.
Location.
Well, I mean, not in the typical Western sense. I wouldn't assume that, even in Sapporo, I wouldn't assume that the value would be going up much over the years.
Yeah, and when we don't expect that. I mean, I've listened to your talks, and you're saying, it's not like Western I mean, geez, I live in Whitefish, Montana, and I have a neighbor who bought their house 14 years ago for $250,000. And it's basically a duplex. And the unit next to them just sold, and they bought that at the same time, sold for $680,000.
In Montana, really?
In Montana, yeah.
I haven't even realized there was a place that was going up in value.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's basically pricing a lot of people out of the market. I'm renting this unit, and my lease is up the end of May, and I'm just wondering what the rent is going to go up to come renewal, if it gets renewed. So it's like,
yeah, well, that's not going to happen here.
A lot of Californians are moving here and pushing up the price.
Okay.
Prices here. So it's a very nice small ski resort community, and it's close to national parks and skiing and just all kinds of really nice things, and that's why most of us moved here years and years ago.
Right. So yeah, I mean, look, we can send you we can put in, if you've listened to our recordings, you probably already know how we work. So we can put in, 1 or 2 hours of just free research, just to give you some samples of what's out there. So we can look, let's say our max budget is 20 million, and then we can look at suburban Sapporo and then get a little bit further. So we'll send you a few samples of each location.
Okay.
It will give you some photos to look at. It'll give you some locations to pinpoint on Google Maps, just so you have a rough idea of what's out there, kind of thing.
Right.
And when you're reviewing those with Caroline, maybe make sure that you also pinpoint the closest train station, the closest town, just so that you have an idea of what life there might be like, whether it's very remote or reasonably remote and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And once you wrap your head around those, and you sort of had the discussion between yourselves to decide which ones you might want to focus on as a category, here or there kind of thing, then just let us know. And we will, beyond those initial 2 hours, we will need to be engaged. So it means you'll have to get a couple of documents signed and witnessed.
Okay. And
we'll need our fee estimate paid in advance.
Okay.
So based on your budget, we can aim towards the lower end of your budget at first. Mm-hmm. And then post-settlement will credit or debit, depending on if you ended up purchasing something dearer or cheaper or whatnot.
Okay.
And for us to conduct viewings and so forth, so as part of that fixed price that covers you until settlement, we're not going to be charging any extra hours for any extra work that we're doing. Like if the realtor is asking us to come over there to sign the purchase contract because they don't like remotes, then we're not going to be charging for that. But if you'd like us to go and visit in person, then we would be charging for the visit.
Yeah. Okay.
So whatever hours it takes, it's usually, I mean, being in Hokkaido, it's probably going to be a 2-day trip.
Right.
And transportation and accommodation. So for that sort of thing, we just charge by the hour.
Okay.
But everything that's part of the normal sale facilitation, conducting due diligence, communicating with the agent, getting all the documents done, and even if we end up digging into 5 or 6 or 7 different properties, that's all covered in the fixed price.
Okay. Wow, that's good. Speaking of those, I think my first question that I put in my email was, what can we expect as kind of the settlement costs over and above the purchase price and your costs? What are the things that
what's the purchase cost composed of? So our fee for something that's between 10 to 20 million, our fee is going to be 4% plus tax, so 4.4.
Okay.
The realtor's fee is 3% plus 60,000 yen plus tax, which also usually for these budgets works out to be something like 4.5%, maybe 4%.
Okay.
And then legal and registration fees depend on the official evaluation of the property, which can be different to the market price, usually different.
Yeah.
So that sort of varies, but for that level of purchase, it's usually going to be something like 3-4%.
Okay.
Extremely cheap properties, it might be as high as 7 or 8%, but that's not going to be the case in your case.
Yeah.
And then your purchase tax, which is a bill that comes in somewhere between 6 to 24 months post-settlement. That also varies depending on the official eval, but we haven't seen it to be more than 2.5% usually.
Okay.
So when we start looking at deals, we usually estimate a worst case scenario purchase cost, because we're not going to know until we get closer to settlement and start seeing all the documents. We estimate a worst case scenario, including our fee, of maybe 16, 17%.
Okay.
And then it just gets better and cheaper as we near settlement. So it's usually almost never going to be more than that.
Okay. Okay.
But you can assume 16, 17% worst case at this budget. It'll probably end up being more like 14, 15 by the time we're done.
I see. Okay. That's kind of the ballpark numbers that I was interested in. So just knowing what we can budget for. Cool.
And then your property tax, which is an annual statement, again, varies from year to year because the value does fluctuate a little bit, but usually is somewhere between 0.75% to, at worst case, maybe 1.5%. In your case, because it's not the cheapest end of the market, it's probably going to be closer to that 0.75%, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's anything else? I think you've answered. So if we do buy a place and trying to find someone to help look after the place when we're not there, is that something that people do?
Yep, we can do that for you as well. The realtor will usually have at least 1 or 2 companies to recommend, depending on how remote the area is.
Sure.
And if for any reason we're not happy with their recommendations, then we'll just hit the phone book and just look for another company.
Okay.
To set it up, to do this sort of work, to organize for a regular a regular visit by the maintenance company. So to set it all up, we charge by the hour. Okay. And then depending, I mean, you mentioned that you're okay with Japanese, or it's not quite up to speed?
It's not, I don't have a lot of opportunity when I'm not in the country to practice it, which is, so, and not as motivated to learn more. So I can help my guests when I'm leading groups over there. I can help them I can make phone reservations for restaurants, and I can help with the hotel things. But beyond that, anything more complicated than my kind of memorized cue card things, I'm still working on. So
okay, so ongoing communication via email with the maintenance company is going to be a bit challenging, is it?
Challenging.
Okay. Yeah. So in that case, you'll need us to just continue facilitating the relationship on a monthly basis. It sounds like it's going to fall within our minimum, which is just 1 hour per month. That's about 3,000 yen per month. Okay. Anything unusual happens, a tree falls on the property, we have to apply for insurance claims and so forth, then we'll just do that on an hourly basis again.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I'm planning on I was planning on, before the pandemic hit, of spending like 6 weeks in Sapporo at one of the language institutes and trying to really cram it. And that's my plan when things sort out with the pandemic.
That might do for the speaking and listening bit. For kanji, I don't think cramming is possible. That just takes years.
The kanji is like, whew. Yeah. I've been trying to pick up like a character a week, but that's hard.
Yeah, tell me about it.
How long have you been working on it?
I haven't really been working on it. I get a word of the day email kind of thing. Pre-pandemic, I used to go to a once a week class, but they're all elderly volunteers, and I'm really concerned about being close to them on a regular basis these days.
Yeah, right.
And my entire day is spent talking to people like you in English, and so are my
Yeah.
emails. So I'm just
Yeah.
extremely lazy in that regard. I should probably do a lot more, but
Mhm.
yeah, I recognize some of them on the street signs and so forth. And if I look at a legal document that I've looked at many times before, specifically real estate related terms, I might be able to pick up a few that keep recurring, but
Right.
otherwise, no.
Yeah.
But speaking wise, I'm probably doing okay. Katakana, hiragana is okay.
Mhm.
Kanji, I don't know if I'll ever get to that level of proficiency, to be honest. And
Yeah.
Keigo as well, like business speech. Somebody
Mhm.
calls me on the phone from an internet company or the phone company, and they want to ask me a question. They talk completely different Japanese to what I'm used to.
Great.
So that's always a challenge as well.
Right.
Mm.
Boy.
But fortunately, the Japanese side of the business doesn't rely on me for anything. That's Chikako, my partner, handles that, and her and her staff. So
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. Oh, speaking of, my Caroline wanted to know where you're from in Australia.
I'm originally from Israel. I'm not actually from Australia
Oh,
originally,
okay.
but I've moved to Australia in my late 20s and got citizenship and so forth. So I did migrate to Australia. And I did live in Melbourne for a while in Caulfield, which is where all good Jews live in Melbourne.
Okay.
But I've quickly moved to the Gold Coast, which is where I spent most of the time.
Okay.
Gold Coast, northern New South Wales, around Byron
Mhm.
Bay, just more tropical areas.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But born and bred Israeli, yeah.
Okay. I figured with a name like Ziv, it wasn't your typical Australian first name.
No, no. It's yeah, that's the Israeli in me. But yeah, I got a very soft spot for Australia still, and Melbourne especially. I just love that city. Aside
I
from
do.
the weather, it's perfect.
Yeah, I love it. I love it there too. I mean, as a foodie person, I
Oh
just
my God.
can imagine. I just when I first visited, I couldn't believe the diversity there of food
Yeah,
is and quality. Unbelievable.
yeah. Melbourne is fantastic, and it's also because the city itself is so. It's actually quite small.
Mm-hmm.
They've managed to cram so many activities into such a little grid of streets. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable. I just love roaming the streets there.
yeah. It's pretty amazing. My Caroline has a little house in South Yarra,
Okay,
pretty close to the botanical gardens, so we can walk there.
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, I really was charmed by the city when I first visited.
So she's still living in Australia. You're still living in the States, are you?
That's correct. And
Must be a bit tough.
it is a little tough with the pandemic. Before it wasn't so bad because we would
Scoot
meet,
over. Yeah.
hook up. She'd either come here or I'd go to Australia. We'd meet in Hawaii, which is kind of halfway,
Yeah.
or ski in Japan. Our last get together was in Switzerland. We went skiing in Switzerland just as the pandemic shut down Europe. We got out. We just got out like 2 days before travel out of Europe was canceled. And so it's been almost 2 years, but she's planning on coming here to Montana in January. So spend a couple months. So she's been kind of locked up with her parents, her elderly parents. She's been doing a lot of caretaking with them.
That
So
can't be easy.
no, it's been very, very psychologically hard for her. So she's like, I got to get out of here.
I can imagine. And the US doesn't have to, they're not too tough on quarantine restrictions, especially not from Australia, right?
Not from Australia. If you're fully vaccinated and she's planning on getting a booster before she leaves, she'll be fine unless things change, of course, with this Omicron variant. We don't know what's going to happen with that, but we got our fingers crossed that she'll be able to make it here without any issue.
Okay.
So,
I suppose with your Ancestry, you could actually apply for citizenship, which would make entry into Japan a lot easier if this thing carries on.
is that possible? I don't know what the citizenship.
I forgot the name of the visa, but there's a visa for children of Japanese ancestors. I'm not sure what exactly you need to prove or comply with, but it does exist. Yeah,
I'll have to look into that because that would be. Because I mean, I think I mentioned that in the email that I'm totally open to retiring in Japan. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing that really holds on me. My sister here in the States, but nothing else really is holding me here.
Well, there's not an actual retirement visa, but that would be. But the ways to do that would be again through the Ancestry visa, or again circling back again to the hospitality business. So there is a business manager visa that's very achievable. Yeah. Once the business generates enough money to cover your salary, and if Caroline is going to be your dependent for visa purposes, or if she's going to be working in the business, then there'll be an added salary that needs to cover her. I think that's about 2.5 million yen per person. So you need to be generating a taxable salary of 2.5 million yen per annum.
Okay.
So maybe not in the first couple of years, but if the business becomes famous enough and tourists are back, that's very doable.
Yeah, possible.
Yeah.
Cool.
Last thing that I just need to let you know is that we've got an onboarding period of usually a month, but with the holidays coming up and then immediately after that tax season coming up, it could take us 2-3 months before we can actually. So again, we can provide research on a regular basis because that part of the business I can do. Yeah. But once we start contacting realtors and sellers and so forth, that's when Chikako and her team needs to get involved.
Sure.
And for that, we've got an onboarding period of usually a month, but at the moment, please expect 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, that's okay, because I think both Caroline and I are kind of we'd like to be side by side when we do this, rather than 15,000 miles apart or whatever it is. So
well,
when
do you want to browse research samples? Do you want me to put in the 1 or 2 free hours of research?
Yeah, that would be great. And
that kind of thing you can share via
that kind of stuff you can share virtually. But once we start saying, well, let's look at stuff and let's talk to you again, it would be nice to do it together so we can kind of bounce things off.
That's great. Okay.
Of course, we could do it over Zoom. But
so you said she's coming in January, so
she'll be. Her scheduled arrival is the 15th of January, and she'll be here for 3 months, unless she can't get back. That's the other thing.
It's always a concern. For me too, if I leave Japan, who knows if I can actually come back? Right.
Yeah. So fingers crossed. Actually, I'm hoping that she can't go back, but that's, but that's just my selfish nature.
Yeah. No, with elderly parents, she definitely needs to get back once in a while, I think.
Yeah, she definitely needs to get back, and that's
okay. So I'll schedule for the next couple of weeks. I'll schedule to put in your initial research just to give you some samples of what's out there.
Okay.
And we're definitely focusing, I'm supposing, on suburban Sapporo, or maybe up to like 1.5 hours away by car or train. Is that about right?
That's definitely the radius that we're looking at.
Okay, with a max budget of 20 million yen, aiming for cheaper if we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, yep, that sounds good. And if something changes, when I'm going to talk with Caroline later tonight, maybe, and if something changes, I'll shoot you an email.
Sounds perfect. I'll get to work on that. Just give me a couple of weeks, and I'll get you some samples.
Great.
All right. Great meeting you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Have a great holiday.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So there you have it. As promised, more laid back, casual chat, but still plenty of information for any of you would-be holiday home buyers out there, particularly up there in Japan's snow country. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Now, before we go, we're also, as always, going to tell you and also link to our other sponsor's website. That's Hiroshi Shimizu, immigration lawyer and administrative scrivener. If you're thinking about moving here on a more permanent basis, or you're already in Japan on some sort of a temporary visa and you want to switch to a longer term or permanent one, or if you're considering setting up a local company or a branch office of a foreign company and you've got any sort of business or visa related inquiries, or even if you just want to find out what your options are on any of these topics, feel free to contact Hiroshi Shimizu. You can find him at japanimmigrationexperts.com. and he can help you set up a company, apply for any kind of visa, or just provide you with the best advice and extremely affordable consultation related to these topics. And he's already done that for many of our listeners. So feel free to reach out to him. Again, that's japanimmigrationexperts.com, and you'll be well on your way. And that's it from us for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Japan Real Estate Podcast. Do share it with your networks, and please let us know what you think. So leave us a short rating or review on the iTunes Store, on Spotify, or just drop us a line in the comment section of wherever you might have found this episode. We love hearing from you. Hope to have you with us again next time, and until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.